If you go out of business because you're not making enough money to support them and provide those services because you don't have the income coming in, because we collect money based on rents. And if there's no rents, then there's no money. So did you then, or do you now have a minimum management fee, or do you charge extra for those services? Because I see a lot of people have this concern that in the event that there's a wildfire that wipes out, Colorado, we had a really nice area that just eliminated hundreds of homes. I know Keith Becker went through that same thing out in California.
We have things and always have. I mean, this is literally the management agreement going back several decades, going all the way back, to the 80s. Gene, who was the original owner that I also worked with, was Gene the Fee Machine. So he really was the original Todd. He was one going back to the 80s of really building things in there. So that's already built into what we were doing with management. If I need to, like if an owner's staying with me. On the ones that I end up losing, luckily it only ended up being like 5 or 6. So we're not talking hundreds.
Welcome to the Property Management Success Podcast, where we interview leaders in the industry to uncover the secrets to profitability, efficiency, and achieving true freedom, whether it's your time, money, or lifestyle. I'm your host, Tony Klein, and I'm here to help you build a wildly successful property management business. Let's get to it. Welcome back to another episode of the Property Management Success Podcast. Today, I am joined by Stacey McKay with Rental Home Management Services out of Orlando, Florida. Stacey, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so grateful to be on your show, Tony. You're a legend of legends on property management. So.
I appreciate that. So let's just talk a little bit about give some people some context of the conversation that we're having. So let's explain a little bit of your background and the company and how long you've been in business.
Okay. So actually, I go way back, almost 4 decades. I'm really dating myself there by telling you I've been in real estate just shy of 40 years. I started in 1986 before computers, and we were actually so thrilled when we got a fax machine at the Century 21 that I was working at. So I really go way back. But I became a broker in 1992. Still only in my 20s when I became a broker and opened my first real estate company, which did do a combination of sales and property management, and then sold that company and started another company in the late 90s that was strictly sales. I was sort of burned out on the property management aspect because back in the 90s, they didn't have all the advances that we have now. So it was a much more challenging profession at the time. We didn't have NARPM, we didn't have the support, we did not have Harry Heist that trains everybody at that time. So I was like, I'm just doing sales. Well, we all know what happened in 2008 when the market crashed, and I was not diversified, and realized very quickly that was not a good idea because I had all my eggs in one basket, essentially. And it was in that 2008 time range that the good Lord brought me back to Gail Moncla, who was the broker owner of Rental Home Management. At that time, it was All American Management. And it was because I needed a job, basically. It came down to, she was the only boss that I'd ever had back in the 80s at Century 21. I put her as a reference. I was going to leave real estate and property management. Gail calls me up as that reference, and she says, "What are you doing? Get over here." And so I went, salary, benefits, I can eat. When do I start? And so I came to work for her and Gene at that point, and that's when we had 1,200 plus doors, about 23 employees. And then about a year after that, they split ways, and it became just myself and Gail, and we became Rental Home Management. And I pretty much was her business development manager for 13 years and brought in a good majority of the doors that we manage to this day. So that's, in a nutshell, a few minutes, my background and my roller coaster ride of how I finally came to rest where I'm at now at Rental Home Management.
Well, a couple of things that I want to touch on that is interesting is, it used to be the property management. I've been in this business for a long time too, not quite 86, but I started in 2000. And one of the things when I first got into it, we actually started in property management by accident. I bought a brokerage, and that brokerage happened to manage 31 properties, just sort of this other thing that they did. And so I had to learn really quickly about property management. And what I learned about property management is that at that time, a lot of the real estate agents looked down on people that were doing property management. Like, why are you doing property management? You can't go out and sell and make this, thousands of dollars of commission check. You're over there doing all this work for nickels and dimes.
Right.
And then and that was in early 2000s, and then 2008 to 2010, all those brokers that were looking down at us are like, hey, can I take you to lunch? Can we talk a little bit? Like, what are you doing to get your business for property management? So there's been a shift in, I think, the status of property management in general. And I know, just like every industry, there's good and bad, and there's good reputations and bad reputations. But I think as long as we've been in this business, we've seen it become a legitimate business, not just something that real estate agents do on the side. And I want to point that out in the fact that you not only came back to a business, but helped them grow up over 1,200 doors. And let's talk a little bit about that, because I think there's a lot of people right now, the economy's interesting.
We're having a wave.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, especially now, just where we are in the year and all of that, people are looking at planning for their future, planning the upcoming year. And inevitably, when I'm coaching people, I hear about two different things. They want to make more money per door, and they want to add more doors. And you've got a unique perspective of being that business development person for 13 years. And maybe you could share a little bit with our audience just about what makes a good business development manager and what made you be successful in that role for so long.
That's a great question. So when I first started over in that role, I'll really tell you what happened and sort of pushed me in that role, because when I came to work for the company, I was actually operations manager and finance director. So I was the first person that those two brokers had trusted to basically deal with payroll and overseeing company finances. And they had 4 corporations actually at that point. They had a software company, they were developing a property management software, they had a school, they had the management company, and they also were running a trade association, which was just Florida-based for property managers. So I came in originally in that role, but like I said, within a year, they went through a business split, and I went with Gail, and at that point, some of the other corporations went away, and she goes, the great thing is we're managing, at that point, then we had went down to about 550, 600 properties. They had split the portfolio. And she said, problem is we have a new name, and nobody's calling. Our phones aren't ringing. So we went from a company that had been thriving, one of the original property management companies, like I said, from the 80s, had originally been a Century 21 franchise, to a whole new name, even though we were in the same location and we had income, thank God, because we were managing 500 plus doors, but the phone had stopped ringing. And I actually went to a Business Network International meeting with the person at that time in our company that was handling business development. His name was Pete. Pete and I sat through this meeting, and it's all about perspective, for one. When you come into business development, you got to have that little fire in the belly, like, I want to do this. And we went to that BNI meeting, and we got in the car, he was driving, and he goes, so what do you think, what'd you think about the meeting? I go, oh my gosh, it was great. And he goes, I think we could get some business from it. I don't know. I mean, it was interesting. I was like, are you crazy? I was like, are you crazy? You're going to get so much business from this. And we had a great realtor that had actually invited us, very known in the community. And I was like, oh my gosh, with Jeff on our side, we'll do great. Well, we come back to the office, and I have all this enthusiasm. And Pete's like, maybe. Gail gets me aside, and she goes, are you sure you really want to be doing operations? I go, I'm really not. I really don't like managing people. She goes, well, that's sort of your job. I go, and I know, I sort of don't like it. I like this idea of this BNI, and let me see if I can shake some trees. And literally, it was so exhilarating that in that first year, and she did have a good budget. She did give me a good marketing budget. So for the brokers out there, that you have all these expectations on a business development manager and you don't have the budget, you're not giving them wind under their wings, then you got to lower the bar on the expectations. But if I said, I want to do radio advertising, or I want to do this, or I want to do that, we'd look at the budget. I sort of developed a marketing plan for her and said, let's do this. But one of the big things, I love socialization. I love meeting people. I love relationships. I like building relationships. So BNI was wonderful for us in that aspect. Within that year, Tony, I will tell you, between some expensive radio advertising as well, we exploded. That was actually 2009 when they went through the split and we became rental home management. 2009 to 2010, I found my niche market, and that was the owners that couldn't sell. That was the people, and we targeted that on radio, on a talk radio that people listened coming in and out, from downtown Orlando to work, traffic reports, and we were on there like, do you have a property that right now you don't know what to do with it? You can't sell it? And we started running these ads targeted to the absentee owner or somebody that could not sell their home and was afraid about management, and we just sort of dangled that out there. And it was very exciting that within a year, going places and people are like, I've heard of you. And it wasn't all just because they heard us on the radio or they saw our TV advertising that we were doing, but they had seen our signs, or a friend had told them, or this broker, because I've been very rooted in the Orlando real estate community, this real estate broker told us about you. So that, I had the bug after that. And I just started, I didn't realize, because back then we didn't really have as much, even within NARPM, about business development, how these things that I was just developing, just like, let's go do this festival. Let's go to the chamber and we'll sit at the tee and meet these golfers. And I would meet these investors because I'd be there when they were teeing off with my little tent and all my rental home management stuff. And I would have a little, contest that they would fill out, the forms, and making those contacts and getting the kill one at a time. I mean, we had the chance to jump into the whole bring in, gosh, 5 miles, and my brain's not thinking, hedge funds. We were I think we were the first one of the huge hedge funds, which if I said their name, you would know, that came to Orlando, and we were referred through somebody at BNI, and we met with them, and Gail walked out and she says, I'm not doing it. I went, oh man, they were talking about hundreds of homes. She goes, Stace, we're going to come in, we're going to deal with these disenfranchised properties, we're going to bring in all this additional staff, and in a year they're going to just suck these properties away. And some of our good friends, our other competitors, did end up dealing with those and regretted it later on. We just stuck on the shake a hand, meet in their living room, sign them up, bring them in, sign them up, bringing them in, and did that one at a time. So my portfolios, what I was normally doing in a year's time was about 150 to 200 new doors. But that was all through word of mouth, being involved in the chambers, going and doing festivals, doing different things like that.
So 2 things that you mentioned. The first one is I think it's really key for people to really identify their target client profile and be true to that. You guys had the discipline to pass up bringing on hundreds of doors, but like you said, it would have eaten your company from the inside out, because I know those guys, they have their own ways of doing things, they have their own reports, they're looking at the financial metrics, not necessarily long-term management, but how can I get a return right now? And so I think it's really important, whether it's the hedge funds or somebody else, to be really clear on the type of client that you want to work with. And when we're first growing a business, we can say, I'm so hungry and I need to pay my bills, and I'll manage for anybody. Yeah. You want me to, camp out in your driveway until it rents? No problem. I'll do that. And it's because we need that money and we want to grow the business. But over time, what we realize is every single exception we start to make in our company to be able to work with somebody that is not our target client, that we haven't had systems built out for, it's going to pull us off into a direction that eventually those things that got us started are going to be the things that hold us back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, I agree 100%. And we had to evolve over time because obviously the market improved. Owners got to the point where a lot of our owners could sell those properties. But I'll tell you, most of them went into it thinking, I'm going to be out of this in a year. They're like, this 2009, 2010, I want to sell. I don't want to be a long term. Well, they started seeing like, wow, the rents are going up and my mortgage is going down and I'm starting to get my head above water. And most of those owners about 2015 came back and started saying, we want to sell. Because now at this point, they're 7-8 years in, their equity had went up, the rent amounts had went up, and they all started wanting to sell. Well, here was the neat intersection. For quite a long time, because I have been an entrepreneur, it pained me that I had closed the doors of my sales company and had pretty much given my life over to rental home management, which was not my business. I mean, a lot of people thought it was because we worked day, night, weekend. I mean, in terms of a business development, I probably was a dream for Gail and if I had a business development manager that worked like I did, I would be like, oh my gosh, this is great. But we really were working so hard. But I always was like, man, for 22 years I did sales as well, and I had shelved that for that about 7 years. Gail came to me and said, listen, I know a lot of these owners are wanting to sell. She gave me a proposition to purchase Property Management University because she was starting to near that point that she was, winding down. And she goes, but you'll have to have your broker's license active to own the school, to have that permit. And she goes, so I was thinking you could open a sales division and you could use this side of the building. You could rent that side. And I go, I know how much you're charging for the rent on that. She gave me a sweet deal, so to keep me engaged. And then we sort of just shifted. I wasn't an employee anymore, but I was still doing business development. She was paying my company. So I was still basically out there representing rental home management, but under Stacey McKay and Company. And now all these owners that I brought into the company that wanted to sell, I was able to help them now sell the property, which warmed my heart, and I'll tell you why. Anybody that just brings in, as I'll say, for the cheese. I always say this, the cheese. For many years, I was just bringing in that business, just bringing in the cheese, getting my little commission and being like, man, I'm bringing in all this business and I don't own it. I don't get any residuals from it. My deal was a good salary and my little commission for bringing it in. And I felt I was never going to see another dime of anything from what I did to help enrich the company to bring that in. Well, as fate would have it, Gail not only sold me Property Management University, she let me open my own sales brokerage. And I got to help all those owners that I'd saved their home, basically. So it still came back to me. And I encourage people, because sometimes we're out there and we're getting the cheese, or we're sowing the seeds, plowing the fields, and we don't see the results, or we only see that little, and I paid my bills this week. And there's the principle of sowing and reaping. And it says, do not weary in doing what is right, for in due season you will reap a harvest. And I felt like because we treated Gail's company like it was our company, we treated those customers not, they're just a paycheck. We invested our life in them. When it came time that they wanted to sell, I had the opportunity to help them. And actually, I still own Stacey McKay Company, but when I took over rental home management, I got my business partner to branch off and do a sister company. I'm like, I need to focus 100% on rental home management. I just have it, they were still licensed, and it's just me, and I do a lot more of my training and stuff through that business.
So I have a question for you. So this is something that I come across a lot when we're working with companies to help them increase their profitability and their revenue. Mm-hmm. There's a debate about so one position is we can't offer sales because we get a lot of our business from realtor referrals. And then the other one is, the other position, the flip side of that coin is, well, a lot of those brokers that refer us business won't be in business in 5 years, and so somebody needs to take care of that client and help them sell when they need to sell. So it sounds like you've kind of had affiliated businesses or roughly affiliated businesses, but what would you say to the company, the management company that just wants to focus on property management, there's a lot of money that could be had by offering sales. So without feeding you into a direction, what's your opinion on that?
So, I mean, you can actually go both ways, Tony. It really depends on your market, your clients. For us, it worked out because a lot of those referrals, or, that basically they were referring back over to me. And Gail was smart. I still had to pay her a referral fee for those.
Yeah.
We gave those over to me. But the clients already knew me. If they had been referred by a real estate agent, because a lot of times through, BNI, my referrals were from other real estate agents. And I formed relationships with every BNI realtor for referral purposes from the time I started back in 2009 in BNI. I will just say that. So if it was a referral from someone that did real estate, we protected them. That did not come to Stacey McKay Company. That literally went back. If they were still in business, we could find them, we could locate them. As much as, again, we can't tell the client that now we formed a relationship over 7-8 years on a, monthly basis, that you need to go back to this person. But we would always give the courtesy, one, of letting that real estate broker know that they've come to us, they don't want us to continue to manage the property, they're planning on selling it, and we would give that heads up and give them first opportunity. Some of them didn't want to deal with it. They're like, you still have a tenant in there, I don't want to deal with selling a tenant occupied property. We'd pay a referral fee then out to them. And I actually did a whole seminar that I probably taught to almost every Florida NARPM back, 2015, 2016, called Selling Tenant Occupied Properties. And I really talked about the nuances. You can't just terminate the lease. It travels with it, and so I would teach these, and here's the forms, and this is what we used. But in that seminar, I would tell brokers, if you end up doing sales and you make commission from that, you want to take a portion of that commission and invest it back into business development to replace that door. I've always had the replacement mindset, even since taking over rental home management. And gosh, I took over in 2021, 2022. All of a sudden I had that rash of owners wanting to sell again. I was like, oh my God, now I own these doors. I don't want to sell them. But I made sure when we sold them that I was putting money back in to replace 2 to 1. So if I lost one door, I was going to do something to bring 2 doors back in the place of that door that was lost. So I don't know, that was sort of a long answer there, but there's a lot of, that's how we did it.
Yeah.
That's how we handled it. And, still to this day have realtor relationships, and we honor them, and we do pay them or send the client back to them if they send it to us.
But to be clear, you do have in-house sales. You also do sales if they don't need to be referred back to another broker.
Actually, no, I actually refer it out to that sister company, which was the former partner of Stacey McKay Company. I just really had her go do her own, because I go, my name is on that company and I will worry about that. And I really got laser focused the last 2 years, just strictly managing rental home management, trying to manage it well, and not handling sales. The nice thing is, they trust us. If they don't have a realtor, if they weren't referred by a realtor, then we refer it into that sister company and we get the referral fee through them.
Nice.
We do.
Okay, so a while back in the conversation, I said I have 2 things that I wanted to bring up. So, and then I kind of got off on a tangent. So I'm going to bring it back to the second thing. So if you were helping a new broker, scratch that. If you were helping a broker hire a business development person, or they're at the scale where they need to be the business development person, what I know we talked about maybe some of the radio stuff, and maybe that was a little bit, maybe that worked back then, maybe it works now, I don't know. But what I want to look into and have you talk about is, if you were starting out in business development today and you were hired by your company or hired by another company, if you were training somebody, what would their first 30 days look like, and what activities do they need to partake in order to survive as a business development person? Because sales is a hard gig. It's not like you just show up and get a paycheck. You have to go fight for your food, and you have to build long-term relationships. So what would it look like if you were coaching somebody into creating this new business development position?
Well, first off, you don't want to put a round peg in a square hole. So you really need to sit down and you need to understand that person that you're putting into that position, because different people have different personalities. Pete versus Stacey. You know, Pete that's like, I think it'll be good, and Stacey being like, oh my God, this is going to be great. Because I could tell everybody, hey, you need to join BNI. But if they're sort of introverted, but they are good at, follow up, and they will make the calls, and they'll do the hard work, and, learn what they need to do to go in and get that contract, get that management agreement signed, they may be introverted. They may not thrive well in a business network, international meeting. So who you have in that business development seat, you need to understand their personality, and there's all kinds of, obviously different tools out there. I love DISC. The DISC really helps you to know, are they that otter or the I personality, as they put it, or are they a lion? What is that personality? Because you're going to form their marketing plan, their activities around their comfort level. Because nothing is worse than trying to take somebody and push them, say, to in Business Network International. And I have some people in my group right now. I love them, but I know they're sitting there and they are uncomfortable. They're just getting up and having to give a 45-second is like, you just see them sweating, and they're in the open networking, they're sitting down, and you're sort of like, nope, we need to be up. And that's because that company president or whoever has taken that person and said, ooh, I want you in BNI, and they put somebody in a business network group, and that's not the right thing. So first step is really understand their comfort levels. You should probably know that before you hire them, but you might be bringing somebody in that's been a property manager or been in some other position within the company, and you're going to now begin to mold them into, the business development manager. Where is that comfort level? Are they fine with going to the chamber luncheons? Because I created my own marketing plan, and that's another thing. You can say to them, what are some ideas you have? As opposed to, this is what I think you should do, I want you to do this, I want you to do that. As opposed to, where are some things that you feel a comfort level where you feel you could gain potential leads? And they might love going to the chamber luncheons and just being able to sit around a table of 8 people and get to know them and exchange cards. They might like business development. They might like the social events, like what we used to do. We would get a table at the big festival down on Lake Eola. And it wasn't cheap either. So sometimes you have cheap festivals. We had an expensive table that we would have there, but they'd have 15,000 people through. And we would always walk away with appointments of people that would see rental home management, come up, start talking to us, and pick up investors and things like that. So really hone in on their comfort levels, things they've done in the past, things they like to do, and mold it. See, can this mold into what we need to do to get those leads for business development for a property management company?
I know every market's going to be a little bit different, but what would you expect to be in the first 30, 60, 90, whatever that time frame is in business? The longer you keep somebody on your team that's not a good fit, it not only is bad for them and bad for you, but it's bad for the rest of the team as well.
Right.
And so how do you determine whether or not they're a good fit, and based on results? Like, is it activity based? Is it, I've gone to all these meetings, I've sent all these emails, what makes that good business development manager where you're willing to say, you know what, I'm not seeing the results yet, but I'm seeing the activity, and I know that activity will lead to results. How do you convince somebody to hang in there with a new business development person when you got money going out, but you don't got money coming in yet?
Exactly. First thing is appointments. If they're not getting in front of people, qualified people, whether it was a realtor referred it to them because now they made a realtor contact that has investors they work with, being good on the phone, answering the phone call, being able to secure that appointment. And for us, a lot of the owners lived here local, so our market was a little different. A lot of these owners that I sat in their living rooms of their homes, and they were moving out of the area because in 08, 09, market crashes, their jobs weren't sustaining here and they were going to have to move. So many of my owners actually lived in the homes. They weren't your typical investor. So you've got to see the activity that they're doing, things that are generating the appointment. You can't immediately expect the result, and that is they walk in the door with the signed contract, because they may be coming up against 5 other people, and somebody might be experienced like me. The more I've gotten experience, I go in with a great level of confidence. Like, if I want this listing, I'm getting it. It's a mindset. And so if they're a newbie and they're going to go against somebody that's been doing this 10, 15, 20 years, they may not be as successful. But if they're getting the appointment, they're having good interactions from that, they're getting good feedback, but even sometimes getting reviews. I mean, sometimes you'll get a review and maybe the person didn't do business with you right then because it wasn't the right fit or whatever it was, but they'll give a good review of that person. So if they're getting the appointments, they're getting some reviews, and it really comes down to number of appointments to number of conversion, that you're coming back in with that contract. And over those years, I mean, I didn't have a huge conversion rate to start out. I could get in front of people, but over time, and as I brought them in and I got more comfortable with it, my conversion rate went up. I mean, first off, getting the appointment, and my husband as well. I will mention I've been very blessed because my husband has worked with rental home management as well. He came in about 9 months after I was working here, so right about the time we were making that change, Gail hired him as a property manager. But then she saw, man, John's really good on the phones. That guy is good, like taking the cold call from those radio ads. John could just nail down those appointments. And he'd be like, oh, my wife is going to be the one to come meet with you. Still to this day, we're sort of that tag team. I mean, if he gets a call, he'll nail that appointment for me. But he's like, okay, babe, I expect you to bring it home now. I got you in the door. You need to bring it home. So appointments first. And then at some point, they've got to start having conversion rate. If they're getting in front of people and they're getting good properties that you'd want to bring into your portfolio, then they need to have some conversion. And if they're not, sitting down and saying, well, what do you think went wrong in that appointment? And sort of try to help coach them on why they missed out. And sometimes you can't help it. Sometimes you get undercut by somebody that's going to do a way below management fee, and you go, they'll be calling. Yeah. They'll be calling us. And a lot of times they did, because I wouldn't come down on the fee because we brought the experience and we had a name in the area for a long time. Yeah. So that's, I don't know if that's helpful, but that's that would be the main thing. Get in the door, and then at some point you got to be bringing those contracts back in.
All right, now before we close out, I have another topic I want to talk to you about. So, y'all down there in Florida, you like your wind and your rain, and sometimes you mix them together. And so I know being outside of Orlando, you guys got hit with some storms out in Florida. How did that affect you guys this year?
It did. So I'll go back 2 years. And I said, what in the world did I do buying a management company? Because in October 22, well, actually it's the end of September 22, we got hit by Ian. Ian hit Orlando, 500-year flood to our area. I had multiple flooded properties, not in flood zones, no flood insurance. These owners took great losses. At that point, we weren't on resident benefit package. I'll give a shout out to Second Nature. I am on with them now after what happened with Ian, but we had so many people that were devastated and they were not carrying insurance, any kind of insurance. And we lost those properties. So one, that was devastating to me. And then I'm not going to just leave these owners like, oh, well, too bad. It flooded, the tenant's out, I'm out. We helped them to do what we needed to help them get those properties dried out and maintain what they needed to do so they could rebuild the property. And every one of them had to sell because they put 50 to 100,000 plus into rehabbing these houses unexpectedly. So it started with Ian. And so I have to fast forward 2 years to when we just had Helene, which really just went up the coast, and it was a practice run. It got me again in that, what do I have to send to the tenants? What am I sending to the owners? This is the shutdown. This is what we're doing. So Helene was our practice, and then it wasn't even a week later, they said, Milton is out there. And I was like, oh my God, like, no. no, post-traumatic stress disorder. Like, no, because I will tell you, I've learned more about mold than I ever wanted to know. I'm actually writing a course on it for the real estate professional, thanks to these storms and the devastation that water brings. So here comes Milton. We had probably about 100 new open work orders. Right the week before I'm going to travel out to Dallas to NARPM to speak. Matter of fact, I was like, if I wasn't speaking, I would not have been in Dallas. It was just, we had just come off the heels of Milton. But I have to say this, Tony, because I had those protocols that not only that I did in 22 with Ian, I had picked those up from Gail, because we had been through several other Irma, and we had been through multiple storms, even going all the way back to 2004. I dealt with Charlie, Francis, and Jean with my other company. Having those protocols in any areas where you are prone to storms, whether you're Tornado Alley or you're here in Florida or the Gulf Coast or any of these areas that get hit by these, just having those tucked away. And then I was able to go in and just tweak my little letter that went out. I made sure tenants were notified first because they have to prep. Then we're almost getting to the storm. Now I got to let the owners know this is how we're going to be handling things post-storm. And I used Podium, which is, a texting app I met through NARPM, and that helps because if we lose power, we still have that texting app ability. And that part went really well. Just the after part when you're like, oh my gosh, now all these, I use Latchel, all these work orders starting to come in, tree down, fence down, this down. And it's funny people's idea of what's an emergency and not. These people that are like, I have 3 fence sections down and it's an emergency because I'm used to having a fence yard. You're like, take a seat over here, because I have people with a tree on their house, So that is the only downfall to doing property management in Florida, is that threat of those storms. And we're not out of the woods quite yet. The hurricane season goes through December. And we had Nicole hit us 14 days after Ian at mid-November. I think it was like November 14th. So not 14, 6 weeks after we had Ian and had all the floods, we had a second one hit us. It tends to happen like that. It seems like you get hit and then here comes another one. But have the protocols in any areas where you have storms. I mean, I know you're in the snowy areas, aren't you? You're in Colorado.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm sure you have your storm protocols as well. But it's not fun, but have the protocols. My team were all out checking properties. The next day I had it already, all the vacants, by geographic location. So I'm like, you've got these 7, you have these 4, you have and that way nobody had to drive way far from their homes, but because we manage in 6 counties. We had all of our vacants literally checked before most people had power back on in their homes that had been knocked out of power, so we could tell these owners if there was a problem or if there wasn't.
So I want to go back to, you mentioned that when you had a storm and a bunch of people, I can't remember which storm it was, maybe it was Ian, but you had a bunch of people that the residents didn't have insurance, the homeowners were underinsured or not insured, didn't have flood insurance, and yet you mentioned you weren't going to just drop them in their hour of need, you were going to help them continue forward, and that's honorable. But I have one of the things that came to mind with that is, if you go out of business because you're not making enough money to support them and provide those services, because you don't have the income coming in, because we collect money based on rents, and if there's no rents, then there's no money. So did you then, or do you now have a minimum management fee, or do you charge extra for those services? Because I see a lot of people have this concern that in the event that there's a wildfire that wipes out, Colorado, we had a really nice area that just eliminated hundreds of homes. I know Keith Becker went through that same thing out in California. And you have more work to do now than what you had before, and you don't have those rents coming in. So how would you advise somebody to be able to work through that and survive while you're having to add additional levels of services on top of what you would normally do?
Yes, so you are absolutely right. We have things and always have. I mean, this is literally the management agreement going back several decades, going all the way back, to the 80s. Gene, who was the original owner that I also worked with, was Gene the Fee Machine. So he really was the original Todd. He was one going back to the 80s of really building things in there. So that's already built into what we were doing with management if I need to, like if an owner's staying with me. On the ones that I end up losing, luckily it only ended up being like 5 or 6. So we're not talking hundreds. And I do know people on this recent storms, especially Tampa area, Volusia County, that literally had 100+ open insurance claims. So that would be devastating. If I lost 100 properties today and the income from that, that would devastate. Yeah. So you want to have those in there. So if you have the catastrophic, in those situations, I knew that these owners were eventually going to sell. So the energy and effort that we were putting into helping to get those houses rehabbed came back to us because we were able to refer those sales. We were able to get referral fees. And I sort of used the same replacement theory that I did on that. Now we've got this. Yeah, it did take some time and energy, but honestly, it wasn't like we were out there checking them every single day. You have to weigh out your time value of money, because time and money is important. Matter of fact, time is more of a commodity to me now as I get older than it ever was. I get very mad if people waste my time, to be very honest. That is one of my biggest pet peeves, is don't waste my time. Like, I want to see value if I give you my time. So on those, every single one of them, we recouped funds on those ones by participating in referral fees on helping them with the sale. So that was beneficial to us. But we do have them written into our management agreement. If we have to handle an insurance claim, how much it is per hour and things like that. We actually are one of the ones, we don't enforce a minimum management fee. So during COVID, I will tell you, a lot of my NARPM friends, and I teach a lot of them through Property Management University, my competitor friends right here in Orlando would brag about, well, even though the tenant didn't pay, I'm still getting my money. And I go, and when I go on a new listing, I use that against you. I tell people like, oh, look at our agreement. If we're not making you money, we're not making money. Now that's just a principle. That is, and a lot of people may go, shame on you, Stacey. Oh my God, I'm not making them. You know what? It's turned into so much more of me adding those doors by telling these owners we're committed to have paying tenants in these properties. If we are not being successful in bringing in those funds, we're not charging you a management fee. That may be old school. I don't know. It works a lot because I've had deals I've signed over that one policy. So it's a double-edged sword. If all of a sudden 100 of my tenants weren't paying rent, we were actually very fortunate through COVID. Most of our tenants, we had some that were having to get help and everything like that. And we're sort of, for the first time, I'm having a little bit more delinquencies I'm having to deal with. But I'll tell you what, then I'm like, we're not making any money. Here's my list. We're not making this. We're at a deficit of $3,000 or $4,000 in management fees until we collect this money. Get on it. let's get on the phone, podium, go see them, find out where those funds are at. Yep. So hopefully that helps, and hopefully nobody's going, shame on her. Oh my God.
I'm sure somebody is, but that's okay because, no matter what you would have said, somebody.
I know my numbers. I know my numbers. I know those KPIs. I know what I'm looking for and where it's going to turn around to help me in the long run.
Yeah. Well, the beautiful thing about running a property management business is there's a lot of ways to do business wrong, but there's also a lot of ways to do business right. And, I think what's important is we listen to what other people are doing and see, is that right for me based on my core values, based on the mission or vision of where I want to take my company. And it's okay to have a different opinion and still be successful in this business.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't get in that cookie cutter. And I know there's a lot of great coaching out there, yourself included, lots of people that coach, but each company is its own individual thing. That's why you got to find your niche market and how am I going to drive business towards that? What activities am I going to do that's going to drive towards that? And that was where we really started out successfully in 09, 10, 11, 12 going in is really just driving everything towards that. It didn't mean that we didn't have little peripheral things that we picked up that, especially with B&I, you never knew what referral you're going to get. And I will give a sub note, because I know you do a lot of teaching, speaking, and for me, once I had Property Management University and I started to travel around the state and teach at the different NARPM events, or get called in by a brokerage to come teach on business development, or different things like that, I get a lot of business from around the state, because when you're the expert and they're in Tampa and they know they've got somebody in Orlando, literally a lot of my students and people that I've taught refer business to me. So that has been a really nice little side gig thing, is having the opportunity to give of myself, give of knowledge to those groups, but in turn then they refer business back to me here in Orlando.
Yep.
Got one I'm working right now. It's going to bring 3 occupied properties at about $10,000 rent roll. So
Nice.
just from me teaching them.
Yep. Well, as we wrap up, I want to give you the opportunity. Is there anything that I should have asked that I didn't, or anything even off topic that you'd like to close this out with?
I'll close it out with my heartbeat, okay? And it's what I spoke about at NARPM. And actually, I've spoke at NARPM National now 3 times. 2020, we ended up having to go on Zoom. I was sort of bummed on that. And then I got to speak in Las Vegas, and then again in Dallas. And all of them were centered around soft skills and emotional intelligence. And I will tell you, those are vitally important for business development. Because the soft skills are the ability to have empathy and talk to people and do these things. It's vitally important really for your entire company, and it needs to start from the head down. And it helps to thwart off a lot of conflict. And these storms and all these different things that happen in these mold cases, they all create conflict. So that's really my heartbeat. I'll leave you with that little teaser. Maybe one time you'll have me back on and we'll talk about that, because some of the training I do is on emotional intelligence, soft skills, why that's so vitally important for everyone in the company to have those skills, because they can have a great resume with a Harvard education, but if they don't have soft skills, they're zero. So that's my little teaser for the next time. That's where I really like to educate people, is just how to be kind, how to have those skills and empathy, and how to negotiate when somebody's like screaming at you on the phone. So I'll leave you with that teaser. How about that?
All right, very good. Well, we'll have you back on and we'll discuss that. But for now, Stacey, it's been a blast having you here, and I look forward to seeing you. Are you going to any conferences coming up where we might run into each other?
Well, for sure, broker owner. Actually, the day they did call for presentations, I looked through their list of 19 topics and I found one and put that in. I haven't heard yet if I'm going to get to speak at it, and I'm actually going to not do it on emotional intelligence this time. I sort of wore that out with NARPM. So hopefully, maybe I'll get to speak at broker owners. We'll see, but I'll attend even if I'm not speaking. And there's some other ones I really want to do, but right now I'm working with a great business coach here in Orlando, Jim Roman,
Oh, yeah, I know Jim. Sure.
through NARPM, and he's helping me on some of my goals for 2025 that will be maybe taking me a little bit out of this broker role where every day I'm just like having to deal with the nitty gritty, and be able to do more of my speaking and teaching. So that will probably steer what events I end up making it to, if I can get to that goal of doing more out there and share than just sitting here at my desk worrying about approving this applicant that keeps blowing up my phone. I get to do all that stuff too. We're not a huge company, so I get to deal with all this stuff.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, I think we'll close out. So thanks again, Stacey, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Tony. I appreciate it. And I love the inspiration following you and all of your adventures on PM Health Group. And I'm like, my God, I would love to do your trip to the Grand Canyon in June, but we'll have to see if I have it in me. I don't know. Y'all are beasts. But I did run my first 5K right before I turned 50. I'll leave it at that. Never had ran and did that. So maybe I need to get in shape in 25 and see you in the Grand Canyon in June.
Maybe we'll see you there.
Thank you, Tony.
Right,
Appreciate
thanks.
it. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to the Property Management Success Podcast. We'll be back with another value-packed episode to help you level up your property management game. If you've got something valuable out of today's episode, please share it with a friend or colleague, and don't forget to subscribe and leave a review so you never miss out on future insights and strategies and tactics. Until next time, here's to your success.